Hey, I'm PKBeats, and this is the series where I talk about things from various wiki pages, and that's all you need to know. First, on the Omega version of Minecraft World, you may notice that the stage is exactly 16 blocks long, 4 blocks less than the normal version of the stage. Given how all Omega versions are meant to be close to identical in terms of layout for this game, that means that yes, for the other Omega stages and Final Destination, they're also 16 blocks long. I'm sure most of you know this by now, but the canon size of one Minecraft block is exactly 1 meter. So each Omega stage would technically be 16 meters long. In freedom units, that's 52.4934 feet. Now obviously talking about canon size in a game like this isn't exactly winning any practicality awards, but it's still kind of funny how we technically have a great measurement metric in the game now. Oh, and this size fact is also true for Battlefield, as well as Small Battlefield, so I guess 16 blocks is the standard stage size. Now what about Big Battlefield? This measures in at exactly 26 blocks, which is a 1.625 times increase over normal stage sizes. Feels like a weird number. I don't know, I guess I always expected it to be a clean 1.5 times increase, but it's close enough. In doing all these attempts, there were a lot of things I was wondering. First, let's stay on the topic of Big Battlefield. We know that stages can change size to accommodate matches with more than 4 players. However, Big Battlefield seems to stay the same size at 26 blocks, which would make sense. But what about a normal stage like Final Destination? Well, even with just basic perspective, we can tell that this is a lot bigger, but for the specifics, it is now 24 blocks long instead of 16. That's the 1.5 times increase I was expecting. So it's interesting that it's not quite as long as Big Battlefield is. Okay, so Final Destination grew up in size, but what about Battlefield? The normal one. That still exists as an option outside of Big Battlefield. And actually, the size of the stage, at least relative to the characters, is the same as before, which becomes immediately clear: 16 blocks long. Whether 5 players are present or 8, it is still 16. So yes, this is true not just for this stage, but for all Battlefield variants. They do not grow in size when the player count surpasses 4. The logic is pretty easy to assume. Because there's 3 platforms, there's technically more space, and thus less worrying for things to get crowded, I guess. I mean, in practice, I don't really agree. With 8 players, these stages feel incredibly cramped compared to the 8-player Final Destination matches. Now obviously we have to test Omega stages, and they follow the same logic as Final Destination, having an increased size with 24 blocks. You're gonna have to trust me that that's the measurement I got on all of the stages I tested, because it was really hard to get it in one go with all these rabid level 1 CPUs. So yes, Omega Battlefield is larger than normal Battlefield. And on the flip side, Battlefield Final Destination is smaller than just normal Final Destination, which is a pretty large difference between these two variants. There's another big difference between the normal and Battlefield versions of Final Destination, but I'll get into that later, so don't go away just yet. Oh, before moving on, something funny that the wiki pointed out was how on the level select screen, Big Battlefield is depicted as being in a sunset, with all the other versions of Battlefield just being normal daytime, despite the fact that this also starts its loop at daytime, same as the others. So why was a sunset image chosen? You could argue that it was to help differentiate it from the normal Battlefield stage, though given how they didn't do anything like that for a small Battlefield does make me wonder. Another thing I noticed in getting footage, and something that the wiki also points out, is how the fixed camera on training mode is really zoomed out for small Battlefield. Putting them side by side, it really makes it seem like the stage itself is a lot tinier. But we just went over how it's the same length of 16 blocks. And just by hopping out a bit, we can definitely tell that the stage is functionally the same. The fixed angle is just super far away for some reason. Like right here, I'm triggering the minimap of the stage despite clearly still being present, while on normal Battlefield, the minimap is perfectly in line with when I actually get off screen. I can't tell if this was an error, or just them really trying to drive home the idea that the stage is, indeed, small. Or honestly, it's also possible that the stage just shrinks down everything, being the stage itself, the characters, and the blast zones all relative to each other, but the fixed camera was just not scaled down. It's interesting to think of, but mechanically it's still the same either way. But you know how this channel works. We like specifics. So here's a good test. Using Lucina, who has very consistent attack hitboxes, against Steve right next to the ledge because he has no idle animations, with no scaling or DI or anything, and using Lucina's down tilt because it KOs at a very high percent, thus giving us a pretty precise KO timing. And here on Battlefield, the down tilt KOs at 298%, but not at 297. So 298 is the exact KO number. And this is the same for small Battlefield as well. So with Steve's blocks, we have the stage length relative to the character size all measured out, and now we've also kind of measured the blast zones relative to the ledge too. Look at us go. Oh, and if you're wondering, these numbers are actually the same for Final Destination, so at least that much is consistent, and this is unchanged regardless of which ledge you do it from, both KO starting at 298. I mentioned this specifically because the wiki for this stage has a prompt saying the side blast zones are uneven, and I feel like this was true in the past, but, well, clearly it's been patched by now. But there's still one more pretty noticeable difference between normal Final Destination and Battlefield Final Destination. Yes, outside of the fact that the Battlefield one has platforms. Yeah, I bet you think you're real smart, don't you? No, but for real. Even though this is the most basic a stage can get, there's just one assist trophy that cannot spawn here. That one is Nikki. Yet she can spawn on other Omega stages, like Omega Battlefield here. So I'll just let this assist trophy just play out, and give you a few seconds to think about why it would be restricted from Final Destination. Figured it out? Well, it's cause Nikki can only draw in one color, black. And black on a lot of dark and blackish colors, well, that just does not work. The logic makes sense and is actually pretty consistent throughout the other stages. For some other examples, Foresight also can't allow Nikki, nor can 75M or Boxing Ring, and this is true for all of their Battlefield and Omega variants. If you're ever curious about which assist trophy or Pokemon are restricted from certain stages, usually that's included in the trivia sections for their respective stage. Just in case you're curious, I'm probably not going to go over all that sort of stuff unless it's like really interesting. And why is this one interesting? Well, on the Final Destination wiki, apparently Nikki... Wiki, Nikki. Yeah, if you go to the Battlefield Final Destination and open up the assist trophy catalog, she's just here. She did it! She made it! Let's go! It's just, why is she available here? I don't know, but if she's not available on the other versions of the stage, it's 99.99% likely that this is a big oopsie daisy. But while we're here, let's showcase why she normally shouldn't be allowed. On the greenish background, the black lines are kinda hard to see, but they're definitely still visible. And this is also true for the bright, cloudy section. It's certainly not pleasant to look at. I think having these sketches on such an active background is just never a great idea regardless of color, but I can at least see them. Then we get to this part, with all the really dark clouds. And when I spawned her here, I straight up didn't even register that this bullet bill had been drawn in. So yeah, I think you get the picture. Or rather, you don't get the picture, because you can't see it. While technically this could have been circumvented by giving Nikki a white crayon or something, given how much the background colors change, there's not really a single option that would work for it at all. No, the real way you make any type of text color work on any type of background is by adding a good outline to the text. But I also feel like having an outline on these sketches would sort of remove the sketchy feel from it, so I kinda get it. It is a shame though, Nikki is actually restricted in quite a lot of stages for this reason, and I really like her since she brings a little bit of PictoChat to every match. But I guess you live by the pencil and you die by it. Now before we continue on the slew of life-changing trivia, I'd like to thank today's video sponsor, Another Fish. This time, it's a brown trout. My first trout I ever caught, so I was super excited. The river fishing near me is really good for it, but it's also really hard to get the hang of compared to other types of fishing, but I finally managed to do it and it makes me smile. Trout are probably some of my favorite fish because they're really fun to find and they just look so pretty. I don't eat them though, I always do a safe catch and release. A fun fact about brown trout is that apparently they're one of the most genetically diverse vertebrates in the world, with taxonomists having made attempts to classify the species as 50 other species at some point. And apparently, across just British populations of wild brown trout, there's more genetic variation than the entire human race. And while humans only have like 23 chromosome pairs, brown trout can have between 38 and 42 pairs, almost double. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know the exact significance of this, but it sounds really cool, so I'll just say that it is super cool. And I love brown trout. Don't you just want to give them a big kiss? Okay, that's enough fishing for today. Get out of here. The wiki brings up how on Norfair, when you have Pokemon trainers in the match, they will be placed on a fresh new floating platform in the background, which is a nice touch. But more importantly is how this works in Brawl. I don't have access to the game nor a way to record this, so please enjoy this low quality footage I found on YouTube. You can see that not only does this platform look different than what we have now, being a single one instead of two smaller ones in Ultimate, but also when the gigawave of lava appears in the background, the platform carrying the Pokemon trainers will rise up beforehand, so that, you know, they don't die horribly. But in Ultimate, the platform doesn't move. They just straight up tank it. I don't know what they've been taking between Brawl and Ultimate, but clearly they should be the ones on stage fighting. Also, in looking through the camera, I noticed that the timing of the background lava hitting you is actually quite a bit earlier than when the lava actually comes into contact with the character, which I just thought was kind of weird. Speaking of background Pokemon trainer stuff, the Wiki points out how, on Moray Towers, they'll actually stand on these parking garages in the background. Players 1 and 2 will be on the one farthest away, with players 3 and 4 on the lower one close up. Also, this is me just now realizing that the color on these parking garages changes depending on which ink type is used for the stage, so I appreciate the cohesion there. Now you might be wondering, hey PKBeats, what about in an 8-player match? Where do the other 4 go? In which case I laugh and gossip about you with my friends because they don't go anywhere. In fact, no one does. When you have too many Pokemon trainers in a match, they just stop standing in the background, and instead presumably stand somewhere in the foreground. You can tell because when they throw the Pokeball, it's coming from your direction. This isn't a Moray Towers thing, by the way, this is just how it works on normal stages. 4 players support the Pokemon trainers appearing, but the moment you get a 5th, they just hide away. Yes, this is even the case on massive stages, like Great Cave Offensive, or New Pork City. Oh, actually, while we're here, the Wiki points out how when the Pokemon trainers are present, they actually stand in the streets of New Pork City. And I just think that's frickin' righteous, bro. Also, the Pigmask logo is stamped somewhere onto every solid platform, which I think is a great touch because I feel like that's the exact type of thing Porky would do. Try to remind you that he owns the ground you're walking on. This is also true for the Battlefield version, yada yada. Now let's look at the Empire Porky building in the background. It goes super high up, right? But then just sorta cuts off eventually. Well, apparently in Brawl, if you used an unrestricted camera, you'd be able to see the tower go up even farther than normally possible, disappearing somewhere into the void. Like it doesn't really cut off, it just sort of fades away. In Ultimate, you can only count 17 pairs of these spike things on the side, whereas in this Brawl image you get up to 23. You guessed it, it's math time. There's 100 floors of this tower in Mother 3. And looking at these windows here, I think a decent average is around 4 floors per pair of these spikes. Since there's 23, that makes 92 floors. Plus I imagine like 1 or 2 floors in the lobby, and there seems to be some cutoff floors at the top after the final pair of spikes, and yeah, this is really close to actually having all 100 floors in it. Probably. So a lot of points for being faithful. Speaking of unused things from Brawl, the Wiki points out something with the Bridge of Eldin, where in the stage's files, there's a model of Cullen tied up to a spear with an animated flag, all of which goes unused. This references, obviously, the time King Bulblin kidnapped him. It kinda makes sense why this goes unused, as it might have been a bit morbid that every time King Bulblin runs onto the stage, he's carrying a hostage child with him. Perhaps the original intent was that you could attack King Bulblin, and instead of preventing the bomb blade that destroys the bridge, it would save Cullen instead? Or perhaps both would be the case? Or maybe Cullen would only appear every now and then. Being able to rescue him in the King Bulblin drive-by would have been a pretty cool touch, though it also would have felt kind of weird every time you didn't save him. Like is he dead now? I don't know, that's kind of cursed. What's also pretty cursed is how we're already at the final fact for today. That being from the Boomerang Wiki, which brings up how, when some characters hold the boomerang, their crouch animation will break. Normally for Cloud here, he just does a basic little motion while he's crouching. I don't know how to describe it, he's moving, clearly. But when he's holding the boomerang, he's just completely still. Like he's still blinking, but he's not moving like he normally does. This is especially obvious when you crouch after throwing a boomerang. The moment it comes back, bam, he's frozen. It's less that his current position is stopped, and more that when he has the boomerang, he gets put into a specific position. I imagine it's the first frame of the loop, since there's a difference in exactly how he looks the frame before and after he retrieves the boomerang. I tested out every single item that, you can hold while crouching, and none of them have this effect outside of the boomerang. And the other characters who share this stupid glitch are Sora, and here we can see that while the animation is frozen, things like the wind affecting his clothes and hair still work. And lastly, Mythra. Yes, just Mythra. Pyra will be completely unaffected by this and will show us what's normally supposed to happen when someone crouches with the boomerang. Nothing weird. There was already obviously no doubt that this was unintentional, but the fact that only Mythra and not Pyra experienced this effect makes you wonder exactly what got broken here. I'm not really entirely sure, but it's still pretty stupid and funny. Also, kinda random, but I was testing out ideas here and realized that the boomerang won't be automatically caught if you switch to the character who didn't throw it, which was kinda neat. Anyways, as far as I know now, these 3 characters are the only ones who experience this, and only for the boomerang. But if you have any other information on that, please let me know down in the comments so I can add it into a future video. And you should also tell me what your favorite flavor and brand of chips are. I like variety, but lately these tapatio flavored Doritos have had my number. I can only find them at my local Walmart, nowhere else. Wait, what's that? The sound of the outro ramble? Golly. I've been putting TF2 footage as the outros for my videos for a very long time now. So I feel like it's not a huge secret that I love the game, unless you're a fake fan and don't watch these outro segments. But as some of you might have noticed, yeah, I've been playing in competitive RGL Highlander this season too. Amateur team, of course, but it's been a ton of fun. Probably the most I've enjoyed the game outside of some of the peak of casual a few years back. It can be frustrating at times, but it really is a great alternative way to experience the game. And obviously way better than the in-game competitive. It's still kind of crazy to me that I get invited to events like Seasonal Lander despite being a Smash YouTuber. I don't even know how it works. I guess there's just a lot of overlap between the two games. I'm not really sure what kind of content I would make for TF2 if I did. Like, obviously people would be like, hey, just make random TF2 facts or whatever, but like, there's already so many channels that do that and way better than me. Like, I think I've mentioned this before, but Shonik is just like TF2 facts, the guy, and he is like so much better at it than I could ever hope to be, so I'm probably not even gonna try and touch that. But maybe one day when I'm feeling experimental again, I can try out a high-effort video essay for the game on some subject. I've got a few ideas. Or, more realistically, I should make clip compilations again on my TF2 channel that I don't touch because I'm already swamped with like a billion other hobbies and interests. Oh, what about a fishing channel? I'd love to get a GoPro and actually record my fishing adventures like I see all these other channels do. I guess that just seems so fun. There's always like at least one thing that happens on my fishing journey that I just think, man, I wish I had that on camera. Okay, actually, I think I have too many interests for my own good. I wish I had enough time and energy to accommodate it all. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Any and all support really means a lot to me. And speaking of support, I'd like to thank my perfect patrons, Raighne, Soul700, Burbo, SpiderJew, and everyone else for the support. Stay casual, and I'll see y'all later.